Hunter, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
I want to kick off because you guys in the past year have done some like big things. And typically when I see that, it's because there's not a quiet period, but a period before where the people that are doing the big things have learned a lot. And for me, it seems like Everest, which was a business that you started, I think 8 years ago, could have been the place where you learn a lot. Would you agree? And what did you learn?
Um, I would agree to a degree. We certainly learned a lot with Everest, but it wasn't my first kind of agency. I'd already sold one before that. Everest was a little different to where I wanted to go back to the roots and just focus on primarily like design for startups. And then very quickly learned that like I personally just don't have enough of like the deep seated like SF kind of connections to really do the interesting things. So we
Mm.
started kind of fighting our way into more of the enterprise and doing a lot more of like digital innovation consulting for big companies. So our thesis was like, how do we take a lot of that like very kind of San Francisco like consumer focused design mentality to enterprise projects? And so Everest had a lot of success doing that. Um, and that was also the first time of working with huge Fortune 500 companies, not on small projects, but on like, multi-year, multi-million dollar long kind of engagements. So definitely a lot of really interesting learnings from that. But I wouldn't say that those necessarily were things that I took and applied to what we've been doing with Assembly. Whereas I'd say that Assembly was more of an antithetical approach to everything that Everest had done.
Yeah, and this is what I've learned recently is that there were parts of Everest that you didn't really like. And so this is the outcome of that was building assembly, which has a lot of the parts that it doesn't have. What was it about the Everest model that you didn't like?
There were a lot of things I liked about it. Good margins, good business, good team, amazing people. But the downsides of that model, when you get into the high stakes of like, let's say an agreement, for example, an SOW is going to be, for example, we had one customer where we had a total of, I think it was 22 SOWs completed with them before we left. So you're constantly stacking these things up and kind of continuing to focus on expansion opportunities and how you're doubling down on other opportunities. Um, and you have this like crazy long sales cycle that leads up to that. And then when you're inside of that large of an organization, you're trying to do that much work. Well, ultimately, you become kind of crucial to a lot of their, you know, North Star initiatives. And then you kind of get embroiled in their own internal like politics. And there's a lot of great companies that navigate that. I mean, obviously, like look at the big five consulting companies. There's a lot of other kind of let's call it 50 to 100 million in revenue consulting companies that do that very artfully. But the individuals that typically are running that, kind of their sales leads, their account managers, are the suit and tie, smooth talkers. I'll say yes to everything to close the deal. And that just isn't me. And so kind of trying to force myself to operate that way and kind of have to put on the smile and navigate those things just became very tiring very quickly.
So the business evolved into something that maybe wasn't suited to your what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Got it. So let's fast forward now. Well, it's about a year ago that you launched Assembly, right?
Yeah, I think we just crossed the year mark maybe a few days ago.
And for the people listening, Assembly, well, actually, maybe you should explain it instead of me.
Sure, yeah. Assembly started as essentially an experiment to say if we partnered with a handful of our friends that happen to have pretty big audiences and rolled out a handful of different service businesses in quick succession, what kind of progress could we make? What could we learn? So we started off and pretty aggressively. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head. It was six or seven different businesses we rolled out within like the first 6 months that all grew quite quickly. And then, of course, we basically speed ran your average service business's like 3 year cycle. We kind of speed ran that over the period of like 8 to 10 months per company. Um, Given the, vast exposure to kind of an audience, the huge volume of sales calls that we would do, the amount of kind of inbound that we would see, different customers, and then kind of the growth stages that we would hit way faster than average, gave us a lot of data. And we've since been working to kind of refocus our efforts and roll some of those kind of projects up into bigger bets that we're now spending all of our time on. And so we've gone from a very wide portfolio to a very narrow portfolio by rolling things up. And now we're focused on just creative in two forms. So if you need to hire amazing creative, you go to Landed. If you need amazing like project-based creative, you go to Off Menu. So that's kind of been the I guess the roll up strategy. We basically acted as our own PE firm to roll all these things up into those two verticals.
I can't even imagine the rate of learning that you guys must have been through in those 6 months, because you had the 6 or 7 different things, but you also had creators like Thampar, Cody Sanchez, Sahil, Ali Abdal, who were like, or helping you promote. And so the velocity of everything must have been like crazy.
Yeah, for sure. It was quite a whirlwind, and it still is. Like Landed is growing like crazy, but um it was, if anything, I would say it was such a blessing because we were able to, really put the kind of productized service to the test across a handful of different verticals. We did short form video, we did like done for you YouTube with Ali Abdal, we did design, we did a handful of other tests across the board. We even, tested services with customers that we never even publicly announced. We did no code, we did automation, like all kinds of different things. And from that, a lot of those businesses showed signs of success that I think if we had gone the traditional route, we would have poured years of energy into. But we were able to kind of shortcut that process down to just a few months, learn quite quickly, and begin to continue pivoting and iterating on those services. That saved us a lot of time.
Cool. So let's just clarify then. Off menu is, I believe, a design subscription.
N- Uh, I don't like that word. Off menu is not a design subscription. You don't subscribe to it. But it's basically, we're recording this on May the 22nd. Sorry to timestamp that if it takes a while to get out, but we're recording this on May the 22nd. But sometime in the next 5 days, Off Menu will roll out its new offering, which is full service creative. So our bet with Off Menu is that we can provide the same caliber of full service creative as the big agencies, but we can do so in a fractional model that lets you kind of choose how much firepower you need, whether that starts with a handful of hours per month all the way up to like, you're kind of doing a full service engagement. So Off Menu is a full service creative offering for growing companies. And our goal is to meet you where you're at based on your kind of journey.
Got it. And then landed is slightly different in that you're actually placing the people doing that work in the company and they pay the salary of those people.
Pretty much. Yeah. So Landed is essentially embedded consulting, right? So one thing that's really important is there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to take advantage of the arbitrage of global talent. We certainly have aspects of that in our business. Um, but where Landed is really special is that we focus on embedding amazing individuals into kind of creative and marketing teams for fast growth companies. And then on a daily basis, we are working behind the scenes to continue to coach the talent, continue to coach our customers on how to get the most out of them. We get on the ground and help kind of consult on process and how to run kind of projects, how to optimize the way that you're kind of thinking about delegation. Like it's a very involved process to where customers are definitely, yes, paired up with full-time talent that they pay a flat rate to us for. And then the talent typically sees around 50 to 60% of that. And then the rest kind of gets rolled up into, the simple things like payroll and compliance and things like that. But more so the, dedicated coaching, the dedicated customer success. It is a very hands-on model. And then of course, for customers that need a little less or have much more of a strong kind of global footprint, we have the direct hiring option to where we basically just act as a recruiter. So basically think a shepherd, but much more narrowly focused just on creative and marketing roles.
Makes total sense. I want to dig into two parts on each of them if possible, the creator side and then the operator side. So on the creator
Sure.
side, do we have specific creators like assigned to each of these companies, aside from yourself and Sahil, obviously, who also are promoting them?
No, we've moved completely away from that model.
Interesting. Okay, so it's just, well, it's still kind of creator led there, right? Because both of you have significant audiences, but it's just no external creators.
I mean, Sahil definitely has a significant audience. I mean, his is in the millions. I have like, I don't know, 20,000 followers on Twitter. So I'm certainly not a creator. Sahil is like that's really you know, his focus is on writing and he's got a book coming out in February that's, you know, gonna probably push him into the stratosphere. But I would say that our original thesis, and I haven't talked about this yet. We've yet to release any of this, so we'll do it now. Our original thesis was that there's enough activation energy in a creator's audience to power a service business. And while that's certainly true, what we've found is it really isn't that closely overlaid with what we would deem to be like our ideal customer profile for most of the businesses, right? So I think where we're at, especially with the service business, is instead making sure that each company can benefit from the brand exposure that comes from an audience, but it isn't necessarily relying on that audience to drive growth.
Makes sense. I think that also aligns with something I've heard you say before, in that what you guys wanted to focus on, or what you guys realized also from the first companies, is that yes, you can get a pop of new customers from any creator, whether it's internal or external. But actually, what you want to do is make sure that they have an incredible experience. So you start driving word of mouth and referrals.
That's right.
So cool. Makes total sense. And it also is very aligned with how I think business works. I have a deep belief retention is the foundation of growth. So very aligned.
I could not agree more. Retention and expansion, I think, are two of the most like important North Star metrics that companies, that a lot of, I don't want to say companies because that's not true, but a lot of first time founders, especially in the kind of services space, just completely ignore.
Makes total sense. Okay, let's switch over to operations. Are you the kind of core ops person for both of these? I understand you have a COO who probably is playing a role as well.
Yeah, so this is this has been one of the biggest pain points for me the past year because we moved so fast and we would you know, for a period of like I said, 6 months there, like every 30 days there's a new company coming online. So I carried a lot of the weight of just how operations works. You know, fortunately for us, we were kind of copy pasting a playbook over and over and over again. But now that we've gone away from like these quick hits or these little pops into two companies that are growing at a good rate, that are um, you know, respectively, they're each on a trajectory to be quite big businesses. Landed obviously being much bigger. The, you know, important thing now for us is to focus on kind of our ops team, our leadership team, and really properly delegating at like a leadership level. Whereas over the past 12 months, we've moved so fast that that's been very difficult to do. I do have a great COO, Christian, over at Off Menu. And then I have a fantastic chief of staff named Josie, who helps me across the board. And she's kind of taking on more of a COO role now at Landed. She also helped me co-found that business, which is really special. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's huge to have people that I trust. And now that we're, you know, pretty narrowly focused just on those two things, we're certainly building more of a leadership team around them.
Do you think your ideal role, let's say we just have these two for the next, say, 2, 3 years, would your ideal role be to have like a GM or a COO running the day-to-day ops of each of those, and you're maybe CEO of Assembly overseeing them?
Essentially, yes. You know, I certainly am a big believer in the like visionary integrator model. So I think having a really strong integrator is good, but also that's a space that I think I thrive in up to a certain point. For Landed, for example, I'm very involved. Like I'm on our recruiting stand-up calls every day. Like, I know every little detail that's happening in that business. And I'll probably remain in the weeds up to about, let's say, 5 million in revenue, roughly. So kind of coming to the end of this year, going into Q1 of next year, based on our current trajectories, where I'll kind of start to step away into more of a visionary role, and we'll have the right people in place to kind of run the company day to day. And then off menu, I'm not super involved with off menu on a day-to-day basis. That team is just, they're an efficient machine. And Christian and Petter, my two partners over there that I've worked with for years, are able to run things. So um, I help with kind of looking at the macro landscape of what I think is happening in service or design, and then helping the business shift its model to best fit that.
Pivoting away from the creator model, we have these two longer term players. Do we have anything on the horizon for a third one, or are we just focused on the two at the moment?
It's a great question. I am laser focused on what we're doing now. So basically 100% of my time is going into Landed. Not to go with the whole like landed sailboat pun, but like our one of the best things that we've been able to do is that a rising tide kind of raises all boats, right? So Landed's growth very directly impacts the growth of off menu in a positive way, and vice versa. So I'm very focused there. We do have a meaningful investment and equity stake in a SaaS product called Brew, which is being rebranded currently to Orchestra. There's so much fantastic stuff coming down the pipeline for that. So that's a fun little thing for us to kind of continue to experiment. And then there's some other conversations we're having about places to where off menu can lend its expertise on a kind of service for equity basis. And we might make a handful of small investments, but no, our focus is pretty singular on land and off menu right now.
Makes total sense. Can you go into how the growth of each of them affects the other?
Great question. We have a lot of customers for off menu, for example. And this is happening in real time to where they'll come in, off menu will help them really go 0 to 1. So stand up everything from their brand, their storytelling, their site, kind of any ongoing creative needs that they have. But then they're ready to transition away from that kind of $15,000 a month price point and say, okay, hey, we're ready to hire full time. And then at that point, we can transition them to say, hey, Landed can help you find an amazing UI UX designer in Latin America, for example. And then, companies can find somebody really great and still take advantage of huge cost savings. Or we have companies that will kind of come into Landed and say, hey, we need a great video editor or SEO specialist or, social marketer, whatever it is. And then they'll kind of come back to us and say, actually, we have this kind of initiative that we need right now. Can you guys help us there? And that's an easy way to funnel somebody over to Landed or to off menu, excuse me. So our whole focus is just making sure that like our brand is built around creative at the highest level, whether that's helping you place that talent full time, or helping you kind of execute on really specific needs that off menu can deliver on.
Got it. So we can essentially extend LTV of any one client that comes into the ecosystem, um, which obviously are going to make you guys more profitable,
Yep.
especially if we have a relatively low acquisition cost. So let's talk about that. Obviously, we mentioned that, and I'm pretty sure when you promoted Landed, you would have driven a couple of customers. So I think you're being modest about your audience there, Hunter. So we obviously have the exposure from Sahils and your audience. And then we're going to make sure everybody has an amazing experience so we get referrals and word of mouth. Is there anything else you're doing on the acquisition side?
Yeah, I mean, we are pretty early in the process, but we're building a full kind of internal marketing agency inside of Landed. So obviously, one of the great things about owning a company that focuses on recruiting creative and marketing talent is it makes it pretty easy for us to find great people. So we're very, very focused on building a strong marketing team for Landed that focuses all on organic content. So that's one thing. And then of course, you know, we do luckily have a network of friends that have huge audiences and also are able to kind of become customers of Landed that we can help out. And so we offered some pretty strong incentivizations to a lot of our friends to help promote Landed if they'd had a good experience with it. So that's been a pretty meaningful driver of the brand for us. And that's about it. I mean, we will probably experiment with some very select paid acquisition channels, just to run a few tests. But for the most part, our strategy is entirely dependent on just taking amazing care of our customers, really being able to rely on them for referrals and getting in front of, you know, kind of our ICPs with really thoughtful content.
What would you say is your unique ability?
Me personally,
Yeah.
oh man. I would say my unique ability is probably deluding myself into into the fact that I can figure out how to solve any problems I'm faced with, and then being relentless enough and the efforts to do so. That's probably like it's just delusional self-confidence is probably my my unique ability.
Illusion, and then but backed up with persistence. That's key, right? 'Cause if you didn't have the
Definitely
persistence,
backed up with persistence. Yeah.
got it, that makes sense. And so it seems like, and I'm just like forecasting forward what the business could look like maybe in like 5 or 10 years. So you could still end up having like five of these, and maybe they'll still be aligned with like the creative and marketing thing. And each time you'll like go and then you'll jump start it and then you'll step away once everything's rolling. Um, is that what you guys had in mind?
Yeah, I think so. You know, there's a couple of things that we focus on. So the first is cash flow, right? I don't care about many things inside of our businesses except for the amount of free cash that they're generating on a monthly basis, right? So everything we do is in service of running a healthy business that generates free cash. The second is a big thing for us is less headaches, more profits, right? So just keeping you know, our focus really narrow, staying away from, you know, opportunities that we think are going to create headaches or customers that create headaches, and just really focusing on, um, you know, taking care of the customers we have and reducing, you know, the amount of risk that we're introducing, which takes me to the third thing, which is what we consider to be surface area of risk, right? If you think about kind of our experimentation phase over the past year and all the different things that we ran, I would say the surface area of risk is huge. When you're running a service business, even if it's, you know, the most simple service business in the world, you're ultimately in a customer's mind or in reality, you're responsible for an outcome, right? And when you're responsible for an outcome, there's so many variables that come into play, whether it's the customer's feedback or how quickly they get that to you, and that can affect the timeline or the subjective nature of the work that you're doing, or did this video pop or did that campaign land, whatever it is. The surface area is huge. And so we've really focused on narrowing that surface area to be as small as possible. To where for Landed, for example, our surface area of risk is simple. Did we pair our customer with an amazingly talented individual or not? Yes or no, right? And if anything happens in that process, we guarantee the replacement, right? For Off Menu, for example, it's does the customer truly love the design work that we did, right? And we have such a strong team of designers there that that answer has always been yes. So those are kind of the three main things for us. And as long as I feel like we're executing on all three of those, the way that we should be, we'll probably open ourselves up to new opportunities. But it's not a today's concern. That's further down the road.
Yeah, that surface area, a risk thing seems like it would have been the biggest learning from the last year. Like for us, for example, I can't even imagine what it would be like trying to do like even two of what we're doing, let alone five. So sounds like a great learning. Presuming the companies are producing free cash flow at the moment, which I'm pretty sure they will be, is that just being reinvested back into the individual entity? I guess you have the equity stake in that as a business that you bought.
Yeah, no, I mean, our businesses require very minimal investment, right? There's no big R&D expenditure or anything like that. You know, we really, one of my biggest things is focusing on cash runway ratio, right? So, as long as our cash runway ratio is over 2 or 3, depending on the business, we're focused on distributing free cash flow outside of that to the equity holders of the business.
Got it. So 2 to 3 times operating expenses, monthly operating expenses, I assume.
Hmm.
Cool. And then you guys are happy to take cash out
Hmm.
over that. Makes total sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think what a lot of people forget or they just don't say is like the point of starting a business is to make money, right? So, our focus is making sure that the businesses are healthy and everybody is being really well compensated. So
How much time do you spend on your own personal brand versus building the companies?
I couldn't even delineate. I'd say zero. I might have a thought come to mind and I'll tweet something out. But I don't have any like dedicated writing process or content calendar or anything like that that I'm following. That's probably going to change very soon. I have seen even for a small audience, that it is fairly well engaged, I would say. And I've definitely seen the benefits that come from that. So I'm going to invest more time there. I just want to make sure it's done the right way and it's not just like chasing, viral trends, but then in a way that feels authentic and like it's a value add. So gonna make more time for that relatively soon. But for now, it's pretty minimal.
Got its focus is on the operations. More have landed, I think, at the moment
That's right.
because it seems like, well, that's the newer one and A maybe growing faster, so it needs a bit more attention.
Hmm.
Cool. Makes total sense. I mean, I heard you say on another show that one of the reasons why you like to be so transparent is because you used to follow more transparent people like the guy from Buffer, for example. And that like taught you a lot and inspired you. And so it's the same for me following people like you. It's almost like you guys are learning so much and then you're sharing them with basically the whole world, which enables everyone else to learn so much at the same time, which is just super valuable for everybody else. So I want to thank you guys for being so transparent.
Oh, dude, absolutely. I appreciate that. We'll continue to do our best.
Amazing. So we're obviously going to link to Landed off menu, your social stuff. Anything else we should mention or link to?
No, I think if you're a productized founder, definitely check out Brew and all the exciting stuff that's coming there. But no, it's pretty much those things.
Got it. We'll also link to Brew. Hunter, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Tom.